Good evening. My name is Ann Huang, and I'm the Executive Director of World Arts West. Thank you so much for joining us today for another wonderful episode of Living Traditions. I'm so excited about tonight's episode with Vanessa Sanchez. Living Traditions and our other programs are only possible with your support. If you like seeing the program today, please go to worldartswest.org and make a donation. Now, I'd like to welcome Māhealani Uchiyama, San Francisco Ethnic Dance Festival Co-Artistic Director.
Thank you, Anne, and welcome to Living Traditions. We explore dance beyond the performance. With this program, World Arts West aspires to lead our audience on a journey that explores various dance disciplines through a series of online interviews. Our conversations with artists will focus on their art form, its history, and what makes it unique. Each episode will focus on one company practicing a specific tradition or one artist practicing a specific tradition. We will discuss how they find a balance between holding that tradition and embracing innovation. Additionally, we want to give you the opportunity to ask questions of the artists as well as a demonstration from the tradition they practice. It is now my pleasure to introduce San Francisco Ethnic Dance Festival Co-Artistic Director, Latanya Tigner.
Thank you, Māhealani. Today, we will be interviewing Chicana native dancer, choreographer, and educator Vanessa Sanchez. Influenced by her rich cultural and ancestral lineage, she explores the deep well of these stories through movement, rhythm, and traditional dance forms. Her work centers ensuring accessibility to quality arts training and performances in the Latino community. I am delighted today to welcome Vanessa Sanchez.
Hello, thank you so much for having me this evening.
Thank you so much for being with us. I'm so looking forward to this. That was amazing. I love it. I love it. Tell us a little bit about the traditions that you draw from.
Okay, so just to reference what you just saw, a lot of my work brings together different percussive dance forms. So the piece you just saw is actually a work in progress that I'm developing. Shout out to Sandy Vasquez, the tap dancer you saw in that piece, and Monica Fimbres, the son jarocho leona player and singer that was also in that piece. And the work that we do is rooted in tap dance, and also the traditional dance and music style from Veracruz, Mexico, called son jarocho. The dance forms in these both utilize a lot of footwork. It's very percussive, as you saw. And what that piece was doing was exploring bringing some swing element of tap into the traditional rhythms of son jarocho. In a larger sense, a lot of my work is also inspired by the traditions of Brazil and Cuba, outside of a lifetime of training of tap dance and son jarocho zapateado. I've also spent the past 2 decades training intensely in Afro-Brazilian dance forms, specifically around candomblé traditions, and Afro-Cuban dance forms, specifically around Orisha traditions and that tradition as well.
How
Nice.
you develop this, the interest and the sense of perhaps combining these traditions?
I'd say it's been a mix of life experience and you know, that rhythm that it was a part of me, you know, just dancing, hearing the drum, it just brought this whole life, this whole vision. Tap dance, the same thing. I started doing that when I was about 4, and, you know, have stopped a couple years, you know, here and there in terms of training, but it's been one of those dance styles that has just always stuck. And the tradition of son jarocho, my mom's side of the family is from Veracruz, Mexico. And so son jarocho, as a dance form, as a music, as a culture, right? Son jarocho is a living people. Son jarocho is a living tradition of people, as the name of the show is. And I was, you know, always around it. I grew up around it. I heard reference to it. And then as I got older, I really wanted to connect with my roots a little bit deeper. And so I ended up moving to Veracruz, Mexico to train more directly in the traditions of son jarocho fandango style, to be clear. When we talk about son jarocho and zapateado mexicano, there are folklorico traditions, which are rich and amazing and beautiful. However, I don't have any training or experience in that. My training is in the fandango tradition. So that tradition comes from the campos, the country. It comes from community gatherings called fandangos. And the zapateado within that tradition is parts of the percussive rhythm of each son, right? So it's built in to the tradition. And so, you know, through the experiences I've had and my own experience, you know, growing up in the United States as a Chicana, you know, Mexican American, moving to Mexico. Over there, I'm a gringa, right? Over there, I'm a gringa, and coming back here and really trying to find a way of how do I identify through dance? You know, how can I tell my story? How can I represent the story of my community, the story of a culture, right? This culture that is here. How can I represent that? And so this is how I came to this vision of bringing tap dance, which is rooted in deep, rich African American history in the United States, and zapateado jarocho, which is, you know, rooted in indigenous African and Spanish influence from the Gulf Coast of Mexico and Veracruz, bringing those 2 rhythms together to not only create, you know, this percussive mix, but also create kind of a cultural, you know, mix in terms of the work. And so my group La Mezcla, it means the mix, it means the mixture. So that's, you know, not only a way for me to be able to incorporate different dance styles and types of music into what we do, but also, you know, really intentionally look at how different cultures throughout history have intersected and how there are, you know, similarities or how different rhythms can be brought together that come from different spaces.
Great. What about some of the aha moments you've experienced while exploring the possible intersections of these forms? You know, those moments when like, wait a minute. Okay, there we go. Were you looking, was it that you know, looking for something and it presented itself, or just things just came as they came?
Well, I'd say that the aha moments started when I was living in Veracruz. And actually, while I was in Veracruz, I was training and performing and touring with an Afro-Cuban dance company, in addition to training and studying son jarocho. And I think, you know, as I was training in son jarocho, I have a, you know, percussive ear, having grown up tap dancing and, you know, being around percussion for many years, whether it was the drum, you know, in Afro-Cuban training or Afro-Brazilian training or tap dancing, being around percussion. As I started to learn zapateado, I heard the rhythms, right? And in my mind started to kind of play with like, how these tap rhythms or how we count tap, the structure, the musical structures are counted a little bit differently, how they could come together, so there was all this stuff happening in my brain. And then I ended up working with a friend named Violeta Romero, who is now part of La Mezcla. She lives in Mexico. We bring her out for shows and performances. And we created something called Zapatap. That's what we called it. Zapatap, which is zapateado and tap dance. We also had our friend Anaí in Mexico with us on that. And it was then when I started kind of seeing how the two fit in, that it just started clicking in my head. And then from there, it turned into more than just a percussive click. And, that's when I really I felt it. I felt like this is it. This is how we're going to share it. This is how we're going to tell this story, and then from there, it's connected to different histories in Mexican American and Chicana history, in the United States that I've always felt, connected to, looking at my ancestors in this country and in Mexico. And so I, moved forward, also keeping in mind, this rhythmic training that comes from the Afro-Caribbean dance styles, right, of Brazil and Cuba, and moved that forward into developing a show around that theme, right? So around Mexican American history, around Chicana history in California.
Nice. It's such a that history about the African presence in Mexico. Mm-hmm. It's known, but it can, what you're doing is wonderful to bring that about more. So it's more understood. People kind of forget that, Mexico is on the go. And there was that, that history of enslaved people being brought to that area or mm-hmm. escaping to that area. So thank you very much for that.
Yes. I think it's important, and it's a history that has to not only be acknowledged, but embraced, and it's influenced the culture in a lot of spaces. It's definitely present in the state of Veracruz and, in different states within Mexico. So, yes, I'm happy to, you through dance and music kind of, continue to push that a little forward into the limelight.
So I'm curious about a specific thing that I know your work touches on, and I'm just thinking in my family, I have several great uncles that were into the whole zoot suit culture. I'm in possession of an image of a great uncle from back in the day in his zoot suit, which I'd always associated more with the African American experience. But you have brought out a bit of history about how this connects to the Mexican American experience. Mm-hmm. And I'd love for you to share that with us.
Okay. Well, just a side note, I really want to see that picture of your uncle. So the show I was referencing in my last answer is a show called Pachukismo. And so in Pachukismo, we look at the history of Pachucos and Pachucas in 1940s Los Angeles. So just I'll try not to give too much of a history lesson, but just a little reference in terms of how this clothing style and tradition came from an African American community and came into a Mexican American community in Los Angeles, and then around the country during the 40s. At the time, this is the 40s. There was a lot of tension. There was a lot of othering. What it meant to be an American. Often meant not being a person of color. It often meant that you were put into another category. You were excluded from mainstream society. So in the 1940s, there were groups of young Mexican Americans whose parents maybe were born in Mexico, or who maybe came to the United States very young, or who maybe the border crossed them. California used to be Mexico. It's something that not a lot of people talk about often. And so, they weren't 100% connected to the traditions, right? The Mexican traditions. However, they were not completely accepted into white America, just to put it bluntly. And so rather than kind of hiding in the corner and not fitting in, they wanted to come out and make themselves seen. And so, during the time, music, jazz music, swing music, this was happening. This was happening. This was on the main streets. It was on the main drags of downtown Los Angeles and, all around the country. And so inspired by the African-American jazz scene, the Mexican-American youth adopted the zoot suit, right? Adopted the zoot suit, wore these big pants, wore these big coats, wore this big hair, and went out and refused to be ignored, refused to kind of adapt to the traditional expectations of their traditional families, and also refused to adapt to, white America trying to block them out. And so what I did with my show Pachukismo, looking at this history, especially around the Zoot Suit riots of 1943, when white servicemen roamed the streets of Los Angeles and attacked any Zoot Suiter or anyone that looked like a Mexican-American youth on the streets, ripped their pants, sheared their hair, burned them. This is talked about, right? It's talked about in history books. There are films about it. There are plays about it. And every time it's discussed, it's predominantly discussed from the perspective of the young men, the pachucos. And so as I've been reading about this, I've been a little obsessed with this my entire life. As I've, just read about it, watched films about it, I really started to wonder, like, what about the young women? They weren't just kicking it at home. They were out doing things too. What happened there? So I started doing a lot of research on that end. And that is what inspired me to create this show Pachukismo, to not only tell this history, but also to tell it from this perspective of what happened to the young women during the time.
Amazing.
Yes. I have a question. In terms of this work, what you just spoke of, is definitely a social justice retelling of a narrative that was omitted, or sharing of a narrative that has been omitted. Was that your intention from the get? Personally, I think anytime people of color dance and are seated and strong and standing in their traditions, it's an act of social justice. But was that your intention, or has it kind of, that has come to be part of your mission as you're going forward with your work?
I want to say yes and kind of yes. Yes and kind of yes. I think that was always the intention. I just hadn't quite figured out the how. And so I think as I've moved forward, as I've continued to develop work and not only in terms of performance, but in terms of teaching, in terms of talks, in terms of all of these other elements that go into being a dancer, being an artist, right? There are all these other things we do other than just dance. I feel like I've definitely found that this is the purpose. This is why. This is the how. I knew the what, I knew the why. It was just the how. And I feel like I've really, over the past 5 years, really grasped what the how is through this process, and really through movement and rhythm. I feel I can talk and all, but I really feel that the communication through the movement and the percussion of it speaks in a different way.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Thank you.
Well, speaking of that, and how the percussion speaks in a different way than the verbal, I think we're all looking forward to experiencing a little bit of your magic, a little bit of a demonstration of what it is that you do. And would you be kind enough to share something with us?
I will. So I am going to step down into my studio. This is my office space. Since we are in the time of COVID, I'm going to take my computer down to my garage where I have my little tap board, and we are going to get moving. So if you are watching, get ready, warm up your ankles, and I will see you in a minute.
Thank you so much, Vanessa. Wow, I cannot wait. I cannot wait to join the dance demo. Hope you are all enjoying the episode so far. Again, if you enjoyed the program today, please consider making a donation to worldartswest.org, or by your phone. The text information is right in front of you. And hope you support our program today, Living Traditions, and all of our wonderful programs to come for the remaining of the year.
Hi, everyone. So we are now in my garage studio, as you can see. I'm just going to show you my tap floor really quickly. You can see it gets used pretty often. So we are going to go ahead and learn a quick basic tap movement. Before we do that, just want to reference that piece you saw. That is a piece from the show Pachukismo. We will be touring in 2022, so keep your eyes open. All right. I'm going to point this down so you can see my feet. Unfortunately, the space isn't big enough for you to see all of me. So you're going to join me. We're going to start with let's just do some ankle circles. Warm up those ankles as we get into it. So I'm going to teach you a basic tap step, right? A lot of what I do comes from different dance styles. And so I'm going to just teach you a basic tap step. Now, before we do that, we're just going to learn a little terminology. This is the ball of my foot. This is my heel. All right. So we're just going to shake it out, warm them up. To learn this step, I have to teach you another step, right? So the step we're going to learn today is called a buffalo. It's a super common tap step. If you've ever, seen old Hollywood films with tap in them from the 50s, shuffle off to buffalo, this is where that step comes in, right? So in order to do a buffalo, we're first going to have to learn a shuffle, right? So a shuffle uses the ball of my foot, just the ball of my foot, and we say brush front. I'm going to face the side so you can see. Brush front, brush back. Try that. Brush, brush. Ready? A brush, brush. Just that. Brush, brush. All right. So a buffalo is going to take that shuffle and put it into a little pattern. So I'm going to start with my foot crossed here. I'm going to start with my foot here, right? It's like I'm trying to show you the inside of my foot, or trying to show you my ankle bone. Now we're going to start with a little hop out. This leg is going to go hop. I'm going to take this leg right here and do a shuffle right where it is, shuffle. And then I'm going to step this leg back and cross this leg back to where we started. Step, right? Hop, shuffle, step. This is the buffalo. Hop, shuffle, step. Again. Hop, shuffle, step. So our timing is 1 and 2. 1 and 2. Our shuffle is happening there on that anda. Yeah, so we're starting here. 6, 7, 8. 1 and 2. 1 and 2. 1 and 2. Step other side. 1 and 2. 1 and 2. 1 and 2. Step. All right, so that was a buffalo. I'm going to do it a little bit faster so you can hear it full tempo. You can try it with me, or you can keep it at your tempo, right? So I'm going to start here, 6, 7, and. All right, so now everyone at home can say you can shuffle up to buffalo.
Thank you, Vanessa. I remember like my very little experience in tap, and like the articulation of the foot, the ankle is an amazing thing. How you can just like create sound using different parts of the foot. You know, it's amazing. We just want to remind folks in our audience to submit your questions to Vanessa as we go forward. Thank you. Thank you for the breakdown.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting, and like a buffalo is it's a common step, right? But in order to do a buffalo, you have to first learn how to do a shuffle. You know, so that it's really interesting in tap how specifically leveled it is, right? You can't do this until you can do this, and then you can't do this till you can do this, right? And so it's been a thing that comes up when it comes to, you know, mixed level, and you know, it's an art form, man. You know, it's definitely a practice, and you know, I am a student for the rest of my life, and all, you know, and I've been tapping since I was 4. I'm still a student. I'm, you know, been studying Sapteado Jarocho for years, still a student, you know, and I think that's part of what makes us keep growing, and part of what gives the work its integrity, you know.
Mm-hmm. And that, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Please go ahead.
And so in something like the buffalo, which you just showed, how would your mind wrap around a son jarocho step or jarocho step, like the patterning, the rhythmic patterning, in like what would that look or sound like?
If I had another dancer with me, that would be fun to show. But no, because I'm hearing it. That's what I was looking up, because that's when I'm hearing things, I do this. When I'm working out rhythms in my head, I do this. Yeah, I mean, one of the things that in my kind of process of developing the work that we do has been figuring out where steps fall within the time, right? So tap is usually counted in either, you know, if you're a musician, in a bar like 4s or 8s, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, you know, around there. So what we just did, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and a 2, 1 and a 2, 1. That's where that falls, right? But in the tradition that I've learned, I don't know, you know, in other traditions if this is the case, but in the traditions of Sapteado Jarocho that I have and continue to train in, you know, I still study with my maestros in Mexico as often as possible. It's not in the same time structure, right? It's not counted in 8s. And so that's been a place where I find where it fits in, you know, find where this step starts and then where this one would come in. And so in the clip you saw at the beginning, there was a lot of that going on. Like I don't know if you noticed, but we never actually start at the same time. I usually start, if I'm doing the Sapteado rhythm, starting a little earlier because it starts at a different place. So I'm trying to think of, I wish I could say two rhythms at the same time to show you how I would make them fall together. But yeah, it would definitely, it would fit within a cafe, cafe, cafe rhythm. That's where I'm seeing it fall. So a lot of steps and rhythms in son jarocho are around food and beverages that we like. So cafe, 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 right? That's the step. And I'll just for a second, if I may, just demonstrate, right? So that is, and the style is very different too, right? That's where, see, like it looks very different. The sound quality is different. That's where cafe, cafe, cafe is. Another common rhythm is café con pan, which means coffee with bread, right? And that's the rhythm. That's where what we do falls in. But a buffalo, I would put it. Sorry, I had to think about it again. I was trying to see if I could fit it with café con pan. I could, but I would put it with a café, café, café rhythm in terms of the timing. Thanks for the question.
You're welcome.
So we have a question from the audience. Besides the connection of doing footwork, what would you say musically is the connection between the rhythms using in tap and son jarocho?
Mm-hmm. I will answer that to the best of my ability because I'm not a musician. I mean, technically, I'm not a musician. I think I'm a bit of a percussionist in some ways, but I'm not, I haven't studied in the music, the traditional instruments very much. But, I think there's definitely the lineages of the historical lineages of where the music comes from, where the traditions come from. Tap is deeply rooted in jazz and swing and blues. It's deeply rooted in that tradition, which are African American traditions, and they were traditions. I consider them traditions of resistance in the community. It's your voice. It's their voice. It's their existence, their identity. And so when you look at son jarocho and the music and traditions of son jarocho, that comes from indigenous African and Spanish roots. Like I said before, it definitely follows in that same lineage of this is an identity. This is a music of a people. This is a music of a lived experience and lived existence. And can in a lot of spaces be used as an art form of resistance, and has for many years in Veracruz, throughout Mexico, and also in with Chicano communities in the United States as well. So
nice. Yeah. Thank you. I have a question around education. Like when you go and teach, be it adults or youth, how do you integrate the history into the teaching of the and then how does that look? Do you teach them side by side, or do you teach one and then the other? Just what does that look like?
Yeah, so typically, just in respect to the first, just as a style, just as a technique, right? As a technique, and then also as a tradition, right? I usually approach them completely separately, as completely separate,
okay.
Because they require completely separate forms of training. They're completely different forms. While there are similarities, that the technique and style of each of them are just very, very different. And so typically they're taught separately. And the way, when I'm teaching a tap class, I always incorporate the cultural and historical information in some context, in some context. Maybe it's not if there's space to be like, let's sit down and look at these slides and talk about who these people are, and look at who these greats were. Let's learn about Jimmy Slide. Let's learn about like all of talk about these people. Talk about where it came from. There's that, but also if it's just a movement class, just it's really important to just reference who made this, like who made this. And I don't just mean a person, but like this comes from real experience. This comes from people, you know, it's a way of life for people, you know, this was a way of existence for people, you know, so just that has to be acknowledged. It's really important. So it's always referenced in some space, even if it's not a long talk, you know. And in terms of son jarocho, I actually don't teach it I don't teach it. I might introduce some steps, or I might incorporate it into something. But typically when La Mezcla is doing a workshop, you know, or something, I mentioned earlier that I usually bring an artist from Mexico out. And so in that space, that is the artist who teaches, you know, and as often as possible, there's also a short talk about the history and the culture that leads up to it, or there's a short introduction in which it is talked about. In the tradition, each, you know, there are different sones. A son is a song that changes, right? It's never, there's a structure, but it's always kind of changing. It's always evolving. So there are different sones with different meanings and different ways that you dance them, and, you know, and so that is incorporated into what is being taught in the class as well.
Nice, thank you.
So we have a question from Sarina Anderson, and she asks, or she says, I would love to hear a short history on the creation of La Mezcla.
Okay. Let's see. So I'm thinking, because I feel like I haven't thought about this in very long, even though I'm sure I have. So La Mezcla was, you know, with the culmination of what I spoke about earlier, kind of just these experiences I had, this training I had, this, you know, exposure and learning from these different spaces and cultures and countries, kind of taking all of that in combination with, you know, my personal life experiences, as, you know, and in terms of how I identify and in terms of my history and ancestral lineage, bringing all of that together was just a way of like, I want to create a space for this, right? I want to create a space for this. And, you know, in a lot of spaces, a lot of the work that I do doesn't really fit into traditional, right? It doesn't fit into traditional, but it doesn't fit into contemporary. You know, it's kind of in the middle in a lot of spaces. It doesn't, you know, it's not going to be on the modern dance stages, but it's not 100% traditional in a lot of people's eyes, you know? And so there was just kind of this middle ground. And so instead of trying to kind of fit into the boxes, I was, you know, just like, all right, then we're starting something, you know? So that's, you know, where this came from. There was a period of kind of experimentation in the beginning and choreographer showcases and, you know, playing with what the name was. We had a very clunky name for a while. I can't even remember what it was. It was way too long. And so, but it still had the same general kind of message of a mixture of, you know, a fusion of percussion and that kind of element. And so I think it was in 2014 that, you know, instead of just kind of developing little projects here and there, I was just ready to commit and make this a thing and provide a space for these dance forms and cultures and traditions to come together in a way that we could tell these historical and cultural narratives that often, you know, aren't in the limelight.
I applaud that. You know, I'm not fitting in the box. I'm not going to try to fit in the box. I'm not going to create a box. I'm just going to create a space for myself and for the community I want to serve. That is awesome. That is awesome. Thank you for that. I can only imagine you've made ways for other people to kind of follow suit, you know, in taking that initiative to create their own space.
Yeah.
And take some space, you know, just take up some space.
Yes.
So what's coming up next?
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned that you're touring in 2022.
Yes. So Pachukismo it's had a couple premieres. It premiered, I tend to develop things in terms of work in progresses and then this culminating piece. So we performed Pachukismo at Brava Theater in 2019, and we were supposed to start touring in 2020. But due to COVID-19, a lot of stuff was put on hold. And so now we are getting ready to actually start touring in 2022. So we have some dates lined up. We're still, in the process of booking for summer of 2022, fall of 2022. We have done a bit of virtual touring, which has been an interesting, in the past year, an interesting kind of development in everything, that's been going on. But 2022, we're gonna be in theaters around California, around the country. I'm really excited about that. And I'm also in the process of developing a new piece. So I'm in the research and development stages of a new project called Ghostly Labor, which brings together tap dance, sapteado, jarocho, son jarocho, and Afro-Cuban rhythms to look at the history and legacy of female labor in the U.S.-Mexico borderlands throughout history. And so the work right now is at research stages. I'll be doing a lot of field work and interviews both this year and next as things begin to get a little bit safer with farm workers and domestic workers throughout California, throughout the states bordering Mexico, and we will be developing the piece over the next couple of years, and it's going to premiere in spring 2023. So really excited about that, and also the intentional integration of the Afro-Cuban rhythms and movements. A lot of the work that I develop in terms of tap, that clave slips in there every now and then, or there's these rhythms that I don't even necessarily realize I'm incorporating into it, but now it's going to be an intention, it's going to be intentional. It's going to be part of telling the story.
Nice. I'm sorry.
Yes. Yeah. Right.
All of that.
Thank you.
We have a question from Baba CK Latepko, the longtime artistic director of the
CK.
festival. Says your work looks interesting. Did you ever present it on the SFF Ethnic Dance Festival stage?
I have not presented it on the SF Ethnic Dance Festival stage. I have not. I've performed in the Ethnic Dance Festival in the past, but I have never presented La Mezcla and the work that we do on the stage. But I would love to. Thank you, CK. That really means a lot. You are a legend, and thank you so much for your kind words.
Well, we want to thank you very much, Vanessa. Thank you for participating in Living Traditions and sharing your wealth of knowledge and your creativity and your dedication to bring forth these much needed to be heard stories. Yes, the new work, the description of the new work that you talked about is just thank you. So
thank you.
It's just that kind of, when we talk about living traditions, so you're in a tradition that's constantly evolving, and you're creating these new ways of those traditions talking to one another and then conveying these stories. So, and that's what this platform is about. Tradition is not stagnant, and you're clearly a living embodiment of that non-stagnation, in terms of like with the work that you're doing. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me and taking this time to talk with me. It's been great.
It's been our pleasure. I greatly admire the work that you're doing. Just keep it up, please.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
We also would like to thank the viewers for joining us today, and to those who've submitted questions.
Wow, thank you so much, Vanessa, Māhealani, Latanya. What a great program. Want to remind the viewers, we have two great programs coming up in June. June 15th is the next Living Traditions episode. And June 22nd, we're bringing back our professional development program. We'll be presenting a very special workshop on equitable contract. If you enjoyed tonight's program, please consider making a donation to World Arts West. Also, sign up to be on our mailing list to get notification of future programs at worldartswest.org. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We will definitely see you back again in June.